So, ladies and gentlemen, before I open the meeting, I want to let you know and give you a few ground rules, let you know what we're doing here today. Today is more of an opportunity for us to get some knowledge from our staff. If we decide to call for an emergency, that will happen tomorrow. So consider this a notice, a 24-hour notice now, that if the commission call to have a meeting for an emergency, that will happen, and this is considered the 24-hour notice. When I do open this up, it's going to go very strict and very simple. We're going to have our call to order. We're going to have a pledge of allegiance. We're going to have a roll call, and then we'll have public comment. You need to understand this. The public comment is not for anything you want to discuss. You cannot discuss anything that is on the agenda, which is this issue. This is educational. Now, if you want to discuss anything that's not on the agenda, you'll be given that opportunity. So I just wanted to make that clear before I open the meeting. And one last thing. Even during public comment, and you're talking about anything that's not on the agenda, and you want to get mad, you get mad at me. You don't look at each other. You don't. I'm your piñata. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and we are going to open the meeting. And Commissioner Schutte, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner District 1, Randy Netherland.
I'm here.
Commissioner District 2, Kevin Schutte.
Here.
Commissioner District 3, Sharon Trask.
I'm here.
All right, we have a quorum. All right, next up is the public comment. I'll repeat it again, please. You are open. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. If it is on the agenda, you're going to have to wait and have an opportunity to speak when it comes up. If we're going to have a emergency declaration or an action, you're going to be given the opportunity to speak. And we will not just limit you to, the 5 minutes that we do. You'll be given a greater opportunity because that's being done in an action. So with that being said, I'm going to ask right now, I'm going to start here in the room. Is there anybody in the room that would like to comment to the commission and to the public on any item that is not on the agenda? If there's anything that you'd like to say that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. Hearing none. On Zoom, is there anybody on Zoom who would like to speak to the commission and the public regarding any item that is not on the agenda? If you would like to speak, I will ask you to raise your hand if you know how. If not, I will ask you to unmute yourself, say your name, and I will call on you. With that being said, I thank you, and we're going to go ahead and move right into item number 5, which is to discuss the status of Fire District 12, ability to respond to fire and EMS requests. Mark.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Neary, Mason County Administrator. So I brought a bunch of information for you today, and I'm going to try and educate you on kind of where we believe we're at. I know that there's been a lot of public comment. There's been a lot of discussion and assumptions that have gone around, and I just want to make sure that the Commissioners understand the information I'm providing you is information that has been verified. And it's intended to provide you with the information that you need to know in order to determine whether the commission wants to declare an emergency. And I have staff from our emergency management team here to discuss what that process looks like and where we would be requesting additional resources to cover areas that may potentially not be covered. So the county was notified, I was notified within the last couple of weeks of the fact that Fire District 12 insurance was going to be eliminated. So I contacted the chief of the fire district and spoke with her about that process and what that looked like. They were attempting to get some additional coverage from a different insurer. They were unsuccessful in that attempt. So I contacted the insurer, which is Nicholson and Associates. It's a fire district pool insurance, so very similar to our county pool. But the pool is of fire districts. So she informed me at that time that as of Friday, 12:01 a.m., that the insurance coverage for Fire District 12, and I have you, I've provided in the documentation for you, and I apologize, Commissioner Trask, I didn't send you the electronic information this morning. But it's a list of the items that are no longer going to be insured, so their insurance coverage is eliminated. So without insurance coverage, my concern and our concern on the team is that none of these resources can be utilized. Talking with the insurance company, they informed me that the only way that they would entertain continuing to cover Fire District 12 would be is if they had a complete turnover in administration, and then they would entertain the idea. So obviously, things don't happen immediately with that stuff. So I do believe that there will be a period of time that Fire District 12 will not be covered under insurance. In a meeting yesterday, a special meeting of the Fire District, they discussed the fact that they were no longer going to have insurance, and they referred to the mutual aid agreement, which you actually have in your packet, a copy of the mutual aid agreement. And the mutual aid agreement is signed by all of the fire districts and all the fire authorities within Mason County to talk about mutual aid. I'm not an expert on mutual aid, and so I really relied on information from these other districts to say, hey, could we cover this? I've also provided you with documentation of an email to MACECOM, instructing MACECOM that on May 17th at 12:01 a.m., that the Mason 13 will be the initial tone for all calls on the south side of Merriam Knight Road, and West Mason to be the initial tone for all calls on the north side of Merriam Knight. So during this discussion yesterday, during the meeting, I believe, and this is my own opinion here, that the commissioners of Fire District 12 felt like under this mutual aid agreement, they would be covered for all fire and EMS calls through this mutual aid agreement. So the next process was to really reach out to those districts to say, all right, you've got this mutual aid agreement, are you gonna be able to respond? Fire District 16 said that they would be able to respond. Fire District 13, I have an email to Commissioner Schutte basically saying that they would not be able to respond to any calls. Hence why the county then said, let's step in and have this discussion, because our concern is that if Fire District 13 is unable to respond to those calls, then we potentially are in a different situation with our constituents within this area. So kind of gave you a roundabout where we are today. So if the commission, does the commission have any questions on this information?
Just want to re-clarify, you just said that there's a high potential that one of them is saying they cannot respond or will not respond. Is that what you were?
I have an email here to Commissioner Schutte, and Commissioner Schutte, would you like to just summarize it, or?
Well, why don't you just read the email?
Okay, absolutely. Says this is an email from Chief Stan Lurcher, thank you, sorry. The mutual aid agreement between Mason 13 and Mason 12 has never been canceled. The problem is, if Mason 12 is unable to respond, is it mutual aid at that point? Question mark. We can help them, but being inoperable, they can't help us. This is a question best posed to lawyers and the state auditor. It presents as a gifting of public funds. I cannot use my taxpayer funds to bail out another district in this manner. We reached out to our insurance company that currently covers Mason 12, West Mason, and Mason 13, and they will not extend coverage to an MOU or ILA, two different agreements, with Mason 12. Due to this, it has put us all in a very difficult position. The insurance company's stance to not allow an ILA or MOU prior to anyone stepping down from District 12 has made it impossible to create a quick solution. Hopefully the lawyers and the state auditor will have some ideas. I will be bringing this to my commissioners next week. And this email was dated Tuesday, May 14th. So, documentation here from the chief of Fire District 13 saying, we don't feel like we have. Now, they realize that MOU and an ILA. So it's not an interlocal, this mutual aid agreement is an agreement. And I think the intent, Mark's personal opinion, the intent of this mutual aid agreement is if we have an incident, we back each other up. So we cover our own area, but if the incident is beyond the resources that we have to adequately respond, then we get backup from other districts, Central Mason, even as far as the Regional Fire Authority up north.
I think that's a valid interpretation of what I'm reading as well. Commissioner Trask, is there any question or any comment at this point for where we're at that you'd like to chime in?
Just a question, have we brought Tim and Mike into the discussion as well?
Yes, I had a discussion with Tim yesterday. Tim was unable to be here this morning because he had a previous engagement that he had to go to. Basically, the discussion with Tim was regarding kind of the definition of a disaster and where do we get the authority to actually do some of these things. And so there's some discussion that can happen about that. I can definitely bring our experts up from our emergency management division to talk about how they perceive our roles and responsibilities. The other part of that discussion with Tim was that based on how we had announced, how I had announced this special meeting to discuss Fire District 12, did not give the commission the authority to actually take action today. So apologize, that I'll take that on me, that's my fault. So that if the board does want to take action after this discussion, then we would have to, as Commissioner Netherland stated this morning, call a special meeting to potentially declare a disaster tomorrow morning at 9:15, 9:30.
One of the questions that I'll probably have tomorrow, unless you can answer it now, is if we failed to do so, we would not be able to get that state support maybe brought in. If we do so, the only negative aspect would be that they might bring the state support. I'd like to see if there's any negative to us doing it, if we're looking for authorities. I believe we have the authorities when these things have happened. I've been here for a long time and we've had little tiny things like this, but those would be the two risks that I see. If you find something different, I would like to know it. Especially if the commission decides they want to move forward tomorrow with having another meeting in order to discuss the emergency action.
So we do have representatives from our emergency management division that could actually answer that question for you today. John or Bob or Tammy, would any of you like to?
Right over here. If you don't mind, can I
You gotta
ask you
come up
please
to the
come over
podium.
to the podium? And for the record, because the people on the public won't know who you are, please tell us who you are, what department you are in within the county.
Sure, my name is John Taylor. I'm the emergency manager for Mason County. I brought the Stafford Act with me, which is the actual law that governs the difference between an emergency, a disaster, and a disaster declaration. They're actually defined in there. An emergency is preparing for the potential life-threatening situation. A disaster is when it's imminent. And it's for local governments to be able to shrink government and to get around those pieces of we're not looking at blame or fault, we're not looking at a violation of the law. We find that a threat exists, irrespective of why it exists. And we declare a disaster to exercise our responsibility to protect the public. It's not about assigning blame or fault. It is about protecting people. And that's one reason we have a difference between the presidential declaration, which is an administrative act that can be done within 30 days from the point of the disaster being declared and has the ability to be approved or disapproved by different levels of government. The disaster itself is the commission seeing that there's a threat to life and them acting on their responsibility to protect the public.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks, John. First off, I appreciate all the work that you and Bob and Tammy have done over the past several months, but this week in particular, I know this is a difficult challenge for emergency management to try to figure out. Can you walk us through what would happen if we did make a declaration tomorrow morning? what does that look like? I think the one concern that I have is, is what does this look like for folks in the community that would call 911 if they have an emergency? Can you walk us through what that looks like for them, and then what that looks like for us as an internal county process?
Sure, it's from our understanding doing the research, one, this isn't supposed to happen, and two, it hasn't happened. So the reality is we're in uncharted territories. But it is clear that fire districts are a special purpose district that was created by the state and a state entity. Which means when we look at oversight of government, is my understanding that it is the state's responsibility to oversee fire districts. However, doing our research, we can't seem to find that department or agency which would have had when they were created responsibility, because now they don't. The issue that we're currently looking at is by us declaring a disaster, we're taking our responsibility to protect the public. We would put incident command in place at the area command level. We would put an incident command in for public safety. We would then use the ranking first responder within the jurisdiction would be the sheriff, who would then be the incident commander, not a sheriff, but the incident commander. We then have a responsibility to then audit the district to see what services they had, what people, what equipment, to be able to do that. At the same time, by declaring a disaster, it would go to the governor, the governor doesn't have the ability to disapprove, but signs and is aware that that's happening. Now we would go through whatever shortages we had for firefighters or equipment through Web EOC, which is the resource requisition process as we declared. We'd have a state number for declaration, and that's the formal notification to the state that we've gone beyond our capability to respond.
And the state then would have to work with the resources that they have available to try and find a most likely fire response and EMT unit, as well as personnel, to assign to that job? Is that what we would be asking for?
Yes,
And so those individuals would be present within the district?
they could be. And that depends on doing that audit to see what licensed or certified firefighters we have, EMTs, and whether they're current. And then going and requesting from the state where our gaps are.
And so as far as how it goes with MACECOM, because I think the commissioner's initial question was, what can we tell the public in terms of how is this going to change how you report an emergency? My understanding is that it would not change that at all. They would still call 911, and MACECOM would then be the entity that would have to determine who to tone out. So if Fire District 13 is saying, I can't respond to these, I don't want to be the initial tone, then we would set up a mechanism for toning out the individuals that have been assigned to this responsibility. So if there were individuals assigned to covering that area, those individuals would be notified first through MACECOM.
Yes, yes.
That's what happens, you got a room full of people on the emergency.
Yeah.
Commissioner Shooty has
So
some-
I guess the other question that I have, John, is just from in an emergency situation, we're able to waive certain, procurement and insurance responsibilities and liabilities and things like that in order to respond for the duration of that emergency. Is the potential there for, because based on Chief Lurcher's email and some of the insurance and liability concerns, would the state then be able to essentially work with Fire District 13, for example, to be able to have them provide that service under a different set of coverage than they might be anticipating without a declaration?
Yes, because I think it reaches the insurance company's concern, which is about the leadership that's currently in Fire District 12. According to the Stafford Act, when you declare a disaster, the jurisdiction's highest elected officials are now responsible, in charge, and in command. So that makes any lower elected officials null and void at that point until the disaster's over and the commission would hand it back over to Fire District 12, which is important to have in the declaration that it can only be turned back over to the district if it's corrected and it can no longer, or it can respond as expected. And then it would be turned back over to them, which would mean I'm not sure what that means, because we found that it seems to be virtually impossible to do anything with a district now that decides not to protect the public.
But we would see how that works out, that I don't wanna make that determination on what somebody else is gonna do tomorrow.
Right.
One of the things that I remember is we had done this in the past, I remember, I'll use, Lake Cushman for an example. We had to declare that emergency so that when we did have these situations, we were able to utilize all those other entities that we normally couldn't have. That was the benefit that I remember of it. And that gives us the ability to contract and stuff with other entities that may have had a problem with their insurance or whatever. That's what we had done in the past, and that's the reasons why we had done it in the past. It removed a lot of those barriers. So I think that's still the same with this, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because it gives the commission the ability to go in and find out what's happening, why it's happening, and correct it.
I'm gonna give you a little pat on the back. You're the one that brought the act to us several years back and started giving us training on that. In all the years, even though it had been the governing act for all this for years, we had never had it brought before us. You did that some years ago. So I want to thank you for that, because that's where a lot of our education came from.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Commissioner Trask, do you have any questions or anything for staff?
I do, I was looking for my raise hand button, but, so I was told that the insurance doesn't run out until, the 17th. So if we declare an emergency tomorrow, how does that affect the insurance, and does that also affect the MOUs or anything else like that?
My fear is, and again, looking at the act, and I'll simplify it, is that we don't get in trouble if we declare disaster and there isn't one. Because that's our interpretation that life is being threatened. If we don't, then there are repercussions to not doing that. The challenge we have is if we wait for it to totally fail, the question is then how do we fix something that's worse than what it is before the insurance gets out, if that makes sense. Is that the sooner we act, the less of an issue it's going to have on the community as a whole. And if the insurance isn't lapsed yet, we may be able to meet the insurance company's requirements before it does. After it lapses, then it just adds to the complication of being able to reacquire assurance after that piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does to me, but I'm curious about one more piece on that. Also, another reason why we did it is if we were to expend funds, when we had done that in the past, we were able to try and recoup them because of that. We couldn't do it without declaring this, and we declared them before there was a real issue. Again, I'll use Lake Cushman when they had the snow issues and everything was happening up there. We didn't wait for the buildings to come down. We had the declaration because we knew at the time of their request they were not going to be able to meet the standard of being able to protect them. So they came to us so that we could have that ability to bring others in at the time when it became necessary. If that's still accurate, that's still an important point for the people to know.
And it is, and it's my professional opinion that the burden lies on the state since they're state agencies. We've had, as a jurisdiction, we've had no opportunity or ability to oversee what's been happening in Fire District 12. We've been virtually led around by them, which is a challenge because now it's a life safety issue and it has to be addressed. However, we have it's my understanding that we have a responsibility to formally notify the state that one of their entities has failed. And not being able to find a representative of the state that will take responsibility for fire districts, I believe that declaring an emergency or disaster gives them formal notification that it's happened, requiring them now to take steps to rectify it.
I want to make clear that the comment of led around was not meant to be a negative. It was just a description of how it works under a hierarchy. I wanted to make that clear. That's not a negative to anybody or anything. But we don't have the authorities, so that's how it works. Mark.
So I think that to answer your questions, I think there is a mechanism within that process to potentially be reimbursed for costs.
Okay.
So I think a common misconception is because we both have Mason County in our names, that the county somehow has some oversight or responsibility over the fire district, and we don't. Okay, so I want the commissioners to understand that. So when we declare an emergency, we actually take responsibility. So the county then is now saying, I'm declaring an emergency, I'm taking responsibility for this. We assign an incident commander, which would be our sheriff, to this process, and we request these services. Since this is unprecedented, the information that I have received has said the state most likely does not have resources that they can snap, right? So if you had a different type of an emergency, then possibly there are teams set up to respond to those emergencies, but that's an incident that occurs, right? So there's something occurring, we can assign people to it. I've heard discussion about potentially Department of Natural Resources being the firefighting side of things. But DNR crews are taught and experts in fighting wildfires, not structural fires, okay? Fire district folks are experts in handling structural fires. I don't want to create a perception that the commissioners declare a disaster and the state's gonna immediately be able to provide a team of people to go out and do that. We are definitely putting the state on notice. The state has a responsibility as the fire district being a component of the state to respond to that. But I don't know how long it would take them to find an additional resource.
Again, from history, for me, the way I'm looking at it is giving us the ability to perhaps contract with these other entities, especially if they're gonna run into trouble with their insurance, that might.
We might be able to use the resources that we have within the county to help out and protect them.
That may jump over the top of it. That's my consideration when I'm looking at it. Any more questions, Commissioner Trask?
Well, I definitely would like that to go, that idea to go before our legal counsel and also risk pool to make sure that we're following that exactly. I think this also gives us an opportunity and others to see what could happen. And plus it'll help us develop policies moving forward.
So, Commissioner.
So if we decide to go ahead with this special meeting, I'm so sorry I'm not there. I'm at a Association of Counties meeting where we're talking about legislative priorities, which coincidentally I think this could probably fit into that category. So I'll be talking about that today to our other counties as well. But if we do this, I would love for it to be sent to Tim and Mike to get there and to include Nicole in this also, because there's risk not just to our folks out there in Matlock, but there's a risk to a lot of other agencies as well. So I want to make sure that we're doing this completely perfect, where there's no risk to anyone. I cannot imagine, and I've watched the meetings out in Matlock, and my heart goes out to you. I really want to see that we can find an answer to this issue, because it's not a small one.
So, Commissioner, and to the public, nobody should hold her responsible for not being here. It's not like she had notice. It's not like any of us had notice. She's conducting her job representing the county the best way she can, and she's already there. So please bear that in mind. Nothing against anybody. So, Commissioner Schutte, this is your district. I was just curious, have you heard enough to decide whether you would like to have a meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we need to meet again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to do the emergency declaration pending legal and risk review, so that we know what we're walking into, and give John and his team a chance to prepare today. Oh, one second. I'll also say this, there is a way that this is completely avoidable, and that is if Commissioners Wallsworth and Compton do resign and do the right thing for their community and do the right thing for their fire district, and actually take this opportunity to put their constituents first, based on what the fire insurer is saying. And we won't have to come back tomorrow and do that. We won't have to have an emergency meeting. That said, I am fully prepared to put the county behind an emergency declaration so that we can get the right kind of public safety and service to the people of Matlock who have suffered for too long under these kinds of circumstances. Nobody, Commissioner, should have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to show up if they call 911. And that's exactly what people in Matlock have had to deal with.
So I think you're probably raising your hand to say 9:15 or,
No, I just checked with McKinsey, we're good on time.
okay, because I went ahead and said at the very beginning. Commissioner Trask, we're not looking for a motion or anything to do this, but I think consensus is enough for what we need without a motion. Do we have consensus with that information from legal and such and risk consideration? Are you okay with meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. For the consideration of an adoption of an emergency, declaration of emergency?
Oh, I'm more than ready.
Okay, so I also will agree, and I don't think we need to have any more action, but I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, hearing no objection, it's been moved and seconded, we adjourn. Hearing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We'll be around, you can talk to us afterwards, you're free to do that. Thank you, everybody.